The balloon drop has commenced. Donald Trump giving his acceptance speech, accepting for the third time presidential nomination of the Republican Party, joined on stage by his wife, Melania Trump, who does not ever appear with him anymore. So this is the first time that she's been seen by his side. I don't know exactly in how long, but in a very long time, having sort of an awkward greeting with her on the stage that I think was a little performative. He appeared to be sort of feigning surprise to see her, but that was... and then the rest of the family and his running mate, J.D. Vance, and his wife joining them on stage. This is not just the longest convention speech in the modern era. It is the longest convention speech in the modern era by a very long way. The previous record holder was Donald Trump in 2016 when he gave what was then the longest convention speech that had ever been given in the modern era. This, we passed that by, I think, about 20 minutes. We knew this was going to be a long speech when we got first the excerpts and then the full text of it scripted at probably about an hour. But this came in over an hour and a half long. This was a Fidel Castro kind of experience. The former president did get to most of the words on the teleprompter, but added a whole lot more.
Yeah, there was a lot of extra cereal in the box, if you will.
Yes. Nicole Wallace, what did you think?
Well, so interestingly, it was pointed out to me that Fox News had stopped carrying his speeches about a month ago. And I thought that was curious. And it was when there was a lot in them about electrocution and sharks. I think when you watch what is arguably his biggest opportunity to speak before the most Americans, you see a little bit of where some of that thinking might be, right? This was very extemporaneous. It was, I think, about half and half, right? Half of it was the scripted speech, and there was about 50% extra added. In the room, it was messianic. People were crying, and they definitely loved it. Trump, who...
At the beginning, they loved it and were crying.
Yeah, he might have
by the end,
yeah, I didn't see a lot
The New York Times actually reported, and we're trying to chase this down, but that actually by the end, the upper level seats, people were emptying.
Well, and the Times had a great sort of bottom line on this. In the beginning, he said he'd changed. By the end, it was pretty clear he hadn't, or hadn't very much. I think if you're wondering what impact this has on a viewing audience, you have to wonder how much of it the viewing audience stayed through. It was longer than modern baseball games with the new pitching clock. I don't even know that all baseball games last that long. It was very lengthy. It was very meandering. I hope that the bigger message anyone in the pro-democracy side got tonight is that the pro-democracy candidate, the Democratic person, can beat him, and by a lot and decisively, rendering the story that you covered with Jim Rutenberg meaningless, if that should happen. The other thing is, if you're looking in here for kernels of substance, describing what happened to him on Saturday night, saying this is the one and only time he'll do that, we'll see, right? It seemed like a story that once he got into it, he enjoyed connecting over and sharing. I think...
Slow down on that point just for a second, just to make sure that people understand. When Trump, in case you didn't watch the whole speech...
Oh, yes.
At the beginning of his speech, Trump came out. He was very, very soft-spoken, doing a very... with...
a reenactment.
A reticent, very soft-spoken kind of sing-song, but very tightly scripted, reading the teleprompter, recreation, description, moment by moment of the shooting at his rally last Saturday. People in the crowd were weeping, and he did very dramatically say, "You will hear this from me once and then never again because it is too painful to speak about." It was a very strange opening to the speech. It was very moving to the people in the room.
And we'll see if that's the only time he ever tells the story, if it is, a little bit of political history that we all witnessed, I guess, together. There's a lot of audacity. There are also a few tells. I mean, I think you saw the impact of the immunity decision in some of the speech, bragging about calling people who come to the country illegally an invasion so that he could use the military was a line in the speech. I thought he also showed his hand a little bit on how he would pursue or identify enemies, saying they say I'm a threat to democracy. Well, I'm protecting democracy. So I saw a few sort of flashing yellow lights in this. I think the larger political thing for everyone to understand is that this is not a focused candidate. This is not a disciplined candidate. This is not a candidate with a simple message of what he wants to do. And when he stands alone, he certainly appears to be someone who should easily be contrasted to.
Chris Hayes?
The first part of the speech, I was struck by the fact that this was a 78-year-old man who had just gone through a profoundly traumatic experience and was forced to reckon with his own mortality and how scary that was to him, and that he is an old man in the latter stages of his life, most likely. He's 78 years old. The time comes for all of us. And that part of it was a part of Trump you don't see because I don't think he enjoys thinking about that at all. I also felt like the biggest takeaway after what has been 3 of the most painful weeks that I've ever seen in Democratic politics, this is not a colossus. This is not the big bad wolf. This is not a vigorous and incredibly deft political communicator. This is an old man in decline who's been doing the same shtick for a very good long time, and it's really wearing pretty thin. And he is a beatable candidate. This was not, and Democrats have been feeling a lot of panic and fear and anxiety, and understandably so. But I don't think anyone watched that speech and thought, wow, that's an incredible, like, that's going to be hard to top. That's going to be hard to beat. How are we going to message against this guy? And that is what he does at every rally. Just for folks who haven't watched a rally, that was just a Trump rally with some speech sort of woven through. I just think you got to look at that and think, like, it's really important if you're on the pro-democracy part of the country to stop him from getting back into office, but that should be a doable thing.
So the concept of conventions in the television age has been prime time. There are 3 hours of prime time in television, 8, 9, and 10. And the job of the final night of the convention was to make sure that the presidential nominee was on between 10 and 11. The final hour of prime time, because that actually reaches across the country more strongly than any of the other hours of prime time, given the way our time zones flow. He got on at 10:30, which means 30 minutes of his speech was in prime time, and then he went on for another hour after that. And so that is a complete failure of convention scheduling that people have been working with, you know, since the 1960s, that you're supposed to try to, not try to observe, you must observe. And Donald Trump, watching that guy, the adjective Donald Trump has for guys like that is low energy. He's the one who invented that to describe Jeb Bush. That was a very low energy Donald Trump. That was not, you have to be a Donald Trump worshiper to hang in for the whole 90 minutes, to listen to all of it. This is the speech in which you're trying to get people who you don't already have. I don't see how this speech could have done that.
Joy?
To paraphrase Eric Killmonger, MAGA, is this your king? If Joe Biden had given a rambling, shambling, all over the place speech like that, elected Democrats would be demanding that the 25th Amendment be invoked immediately. They would scramble, even worse than they are now, to jettison him as the candidate for president, and we would be questioning his mental acuity. Donald Trump went off that script for more than half of it. We had this text in front of us. He clearly was bored by the text and then became an old vaudevillian who much preferred his old shtick and was therefore reciting the shtick to the day nurse. That was proof that there's not just one old man in the race. Donald Trump is an old man clearly in decline. And we must start talking about him the same way that we are questioning Joe Biden, because Donald Trump cannot stay on message for even 5 to 10 minutes, even telling a story about the most traumatic moments of his life. He still eventually got to sharks. He got to Hannibal Lecter. He can't stop doing it because if you know, and I say this as somebody who absolutely adores senior citizens. They're my favorite people. But one of the things that happens when they begin to decline is that they go to safe places in their minds, stories that they're comforted by, that they remember and that they can recite, and they do it over and over again. Donald Trump is not a candidate that Democrats should be terrified of. Their terror is embarrassing tonight. MAGA, is this your king? That's what I got.
I want to go to Jacob Soboroff, who's in the room. We saw him being assaulted, frankly, by a gold balloon. Jacob, I'm glad to see you won that fight. Oh, yeah.
Not quite, Rachel. You can see former President Trump, J.D. Vance, right here. I have to tell you, Rachel, it's an almost unspeakable feeling to be in a room that's such a celebratory nature and hear the man behind me talk about deporting more people than President Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1954, an operation with a name so racist that it's not appropriate to say on television. He's talking about removing more than 10 million people from this country who have been here, many of them since they were little children, contribute to this society, contribute to this economy, live in all of our neighborhoods and communities. And now we're throwing balloons around as if this is a party. He talked about the Democrats, again, cheating. Cheat was the word he used in the last election after saying he was here to unify the nation. And it's a bizarre feeling that I'm not sure I'm able to fully articulate right now. They're painting it as a party, but it is a deeply divisive message. Any way you want to look at it, you can put the unity bumper sticker all over it. But what we heard tonight was not a message of bringing people together. It was a message of literally kicking millions of people out of the country.
Jacob, he literally talked about how he would empty out the whole country. He fantasized about being the head of other countries as well, and how he would empty them out. Thank you, Jacob. I'm not going to make you back and forth with me too much because I know you are in a loud spot from where you are. But thank you for that, from right next to the stage. Alex, I want to get your reaction to what you heard in the speech. You okay? You okay? You just gave me a look like, do not ask me.
I can't believe we're here. We're all still here. Political strategist Twitter had some choice phrases, including crushingly stupid and incoherent lunacy, but I preferred aging autocrat. You pointed out that this was Castroian in length. Yeah. Michael Beschloss pointed out that Khrushchev and Castro tended to give long stem winders, kind of incoherent ones, as they were aging. And it's symptomatic of a party that indulges in a cult of personality, that it's put all its chips on the persona of one individual and their frailties and strengths. In this case, I think there were a lot more frailties than there were strengths. I don't think it was coincidence that in addition to ad-libbing Joe Biden's name into the speech and quote-unquote crazy Nancy Pelosi, he also brought Viktor Orban and Kim Jong-un into the speech. You know,
for unreserved praise.
Unreserved praise. And I think it's exactly what you said, Joy. He's retreating to the parts of his mind that are that give him comfort, the people that hold a special place in his mental tunnels. And it's very revealing. The fact that he's allowed to indulge himself like this is a damning indictment of the Republican Party. And I agree with, everything that you guys have said about he's actually an incredibly weak candidate. And, we should redirect our focus to his weaknesses, his indulgences, the cult that surrounds him, the autocratic tendencies. This is the Republican Party. This is their celebration. These are those balloons are for Donald Trump.
It's a really good point to talk about how a speech like that is about indulging the man giving it.
Yes.
When you've been told that every word that pops into your head is worth saying and everybody wants to hear it, you put that many words out.
Yeah.
Jen Psaki, what did you think?
Undoubtedly. I mean, I will say, just to echo what Lauren said earlier, and I'm just thinking from being a part of many convention speeches past, and this is not a traditional one, I think we can all agree. The first 35 to 40 minutes were about himself or about Donald Trump. And while, as you said earlier, Rachel, he did stick to the teleprompter for a page and a half or so there.
Yeah.
He also, for a man who is not a person of faith, but has struck a chord with the faith community in our country, referred to himself, and this is a line that stuck out to me, "I stand before you in Serena only by the grace of Almighty God." Many people say it was a providential moment. And we don't know. He said he wasn't going to talk about this again. He was surrounded by photos of his own bloody face that was projected in the arena. Obviously, that was a very traumatic moment for him, for the country. But he also spoke about this as if it was sort of a calling from God in a moment where he was positioning himself in that way. Which struck me for obvious reasons, but we'll also see how he speaks, if he speaks about this moving forward.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking, to your point, and to the weakness of him, if you're tuning in and you're not really paying attention and you're undecided, I don't know who these people are, but you may tune in and think, maybe the other guy.
Or anyone else.
What about that other guy in the debate? That was one thing, because it was meandering, it was strange, it was hard to follow. Hannibal Lecter was included. So that's what I wonder.
You can see why Fox doesn't show it. I mean, why Fox doesn't show its rallies anymore. And I think for most Americans, they don't experience the rallies. There's a roving group of people who go to each of the rallies, so they experience this. Tim Alberta tweeted, the reporter Tim Alberta tweeted, "I'm standing 10 feet from the stage in a sea of diehards, and some are getting restless, checking phones, stealing glances at the teleprompter, whispering about when it will be over." And by the way, I Googled, because we had time, plenty of time, to Google the longest Fidel Castro speeches, so he didn't quite get there. 4 hours and 29 seconds at the UN in 1960.
He has time.
And 7 hours and 10 minutes at the Communist Party conference in Havana in 1986. So he was shorter than that.
The asides used to be the best part of the Trump speeches, and now they're the greatest liabilities.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.